some news regarding the nomination of Brian Quintenz to be the chair of the CFTC. In fact, you had there was a report by Politico, I think just yesterday, that the Winklevoss twins were pushing the president to withdraw that nomination. There's been other names floated. Another issue that has occurred, particularly since you left, Commissioner, is that we're down to 2 commissioners. We may be down to 1 soon. And there's some staff that have left the CFTC for one reason or another, some voluntarily, some not. Are you concerned about the resources at the CFTC and the staffing and leadership for the future to ensure that we have the bandwidth necessary to regulate this space?
Yeah, I'm certainly concerned about the resources at the CFTC. I mean, the normal situation is as commissioners roll off, when their terms roll off, new commissioners are then nominated and confirmed by the Senate. I mean, my term ended in April of 2024. I stayed till the end of May 2025. Waiting for that to happen. That did not happen. And ultimately, the White House gave Brian Quintenz the remainder of what was left on my term. But I think with everything that's going on in terms of, there's a lot of recommendations in this report, and then there's a lot of support for the CFTC to get this further jurisdiction, expanded jurisdiction in whatever form over spot crypto, because Bitcoin and ETH are commodities. I think there has to be resources. I think that starts with having a confirmed chair that's going to bring some certainty. That person can, have their priorities, bring in their team, and set up what they want in order to be able to accomplish this. But I think there's a real concern over resource constraints. Even if the legislation doesn't happen, there's a lot of rulemaking that has to take place. I mean, one thing about this report, it's certainly what rings through this report is certainly that the administration wants to harness innovation, but that there be rules of the road, and that requires rulemaking. There's a lot of discussion about very specific rules that would have to happen in a registration process under this report. All of that requires not just staff, but requires a full commission. So beyond just getting the chairman, I think there needs to be a full commission. Ultimately, what you see, and it has been proven again and again, is full bipartisan commissions end up with better rules that are longer lasting, that are not likely to just be overturned every time the administration changes. And businesses want that, and government likes that, and that's good for everyone.
Just unpack this a little bit more for our audience so that they can kind of understand where we're sitting with the CFTC. If Brian Quintenz gets confirmed, there is a reality where maybe he's the only person there making decisions, trying to put these right rules based on this guidance. What does that mean for, I guess, regulation and the agency? Like, where does that take us?
Yeah, I mean, I look, I'm not the agency's general counsel, but I think when looking at the quorum rules, the agency can still act, but is that the best way to act, particularly when you have an emerging market and companies who want to invest, whether they're TradFi wanting to invest in this space, whether they're VCs, wherever, there's a lot of money that could potentially come into this space. And some of those are from regulated entities and some of them are not, but they all are going to want some certainty that whatever the clarity is that is brought, no pun intended, they can count on, and that if they make those investments, it's not going to turn over quickly. So I think this can be handled by the White House nominating names and the Senate and confirming those names, but we haven't seen that yet.
Rebecca, I think you and I are the only two left to make a clarity pun, and we have 10 minutes okay, challenge accepted program. But curious to hear your perspective on this as well, Rebecca.
The one thing that I wanted to key off of what Commissioner Goldsmith-Romero was saying is that, obviously we've seen a lot of movement on the securities side from Robinhood and Coinbase, and even you've seen letters go in from Citadel and things like that to the task force. But because, we're sort of in a bit of a pause or a hold right now on the CFTC side, it is not as public where CFTC regulated entities are sitting and what they're thinking about on this. But I can say just from a lot of what we've seen in DC on the policy side, CFTC regulated entities very much care what happens at the CFTC as it relates to crypto and their market share and how everyone can go forward, and making sure there's a level playing field and not sort of better regulations for crypto or things that may put them at a disadvantage. So I think it's really important that when when the CFTC can act with a chair at its helm, that there are commissioners in place too, and that a lot is moving forward, I think, in a more traditional sense, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, that's another really smart comment, Rebecca, because there, of course, the CFTC had all these things that it's been doing for many years, and a lot of traditional, I don't even know if they're traditional or not, but existing market participants that they're regulating, who also were relying on the CFTC to regulate their products and to obviously engage with them. I had a question for you. Jen and I, Rebecca, Jen and I spoke before we brought the two of you in about this deal that Chase has now with Coinbase. And I think with the Genius Act, which this report discussed, there's real opportunity for TradFi to get involved. And I think they're already chomping at the bit to get involved in that, because cash is super popular. Digital cash presumably is going to be even more popular. How do you see TradFi, particularly banks, getting, how do you see them getting involved in the crypto space in the years to come?
Banks were quietly building for years. I'm sure Commissioner Goldsmith Romero saw a lot of that when she was at the CFTC, but they were building in stealth. I mean, to steal a word that we use a lot in crypto, on the startup side, the banks were building in stealth. If you were in a lot of the regulatory rooms, they would talk about what they were doing. They were getting ready. And like everybody used to say on panels, during the last 4 years before this, oh, once we have regulatory clarity, TradFi is going to come in. And now you're watching it happen day to day. I think with the advent of Genius and the explosion of stablecoins, and you can see it from everybody such as Walmart talking about wanting to incorporate stablecoins, and Shopify, and those, it is how day-to-day Americans are going to interact with crypto. So whether they know it or not, there will likely be stablecoin infrastructure on their back end. And these large consumer-facing companies actually like stablecoins because it will be better for their business because it takes their fees down so substantially. I don't think it will replace things like credit cards, because there will always be a role for that. And both for certainty for retailers and also for purchasers. But I think we are going to see an explosion of stablecoins. I don't know if we're getting to, the numbers that Secretary Bessent said in his video, but I think we'll see a much bigger explosion coming forward.
I'm hearing the same thing. And, I was the nominee last year for the FDIC chairman. I think a lot of banks were trying to figure out how they could get into it. And their main thing was they're regulated. So they didn't want to do anything that would be go sideways of regulations. So I remember in my confirmation hearing, Senator Lummis asked me, should banks be able to hold crypto or offer banking services to crypto companies? And I said, yeah, that's just not the role of the FDIC to determine that. I think banks have wanted to go there, but they're not going to go anywhere. They're so highly regulated. They're not going to go anywhere that they think will go sideways of regulators. So I think some of the things that the regulators have done, removing reputation risk and sort of thinking about, like, how do we look at this and how do we think of risk in a different way, more aligned with how we normally think of risk. I think it will be important going forward, but I think the Genius Act, as Rebecca said, that being passed is the main thing, because a lot of the banks that I was sort of talking to were really focused on stablecoin for the properties that it is, and thinking about it for a number of different ways.